So thank you so much for joining. I'm so grateful everyone's given 1 hour of their time, but maybe 1.5 hours, and especially for some of my pictures and stories that we have to tell. So I'm so grateful for the time that people have spared for me. So, and I said this particular presentation is for your blessings and with your blessings, all of you, my friends and family who have supported me in so many different ways. So I will dedicate today's presentation to all of you who are present here and all who may watch the recording of this one later. So I'm going to start sharing my screen, and uh, let's see the presentation from here on. Mostly it's about pictures. Some of it is about some stories I might have to share along with the pictures. So that's why I said these are my pictures, my stories. When it's not my picture, I'll tell you this is not my picture. And the first one is definitely not, it's a picture of me, but it's not taken by my camera. So I've given picture credit to Manjula Verma. She's also in this. I think she took a beautiful shot, and the light is perfect and the colors are wonderful. And believe me, this was one time in my entire photography hobby where I've not felt the need to touch up the colors. The colors are mostly natural. When you look at this blue, it was exactly like this blue. And if you look at the snow, if you look closer, actually it's a shade of pink. And it was exactly the shade of pink, the snow. And if you look at the penguins in the background, it was exactly the way it is. There's no modification whatsoever. So Antarctica, just as a background, is the seventh continent. Anything that is 60 degrees south of latitude is considered Antarctica. Whether it's an ice mass or whether it's an land mass which is covered in ice, or whether it's rocks or islands, it's all considered Antarctica. And as a background to this, when we said, where is Antarctica? How do you get a visa to go there? There's no visa that you need to go there because it's a continent that belongs to nobody. It's not inhabited by human beings other than those who have set up little camps over there, including India. But over the last couple of centuries, there was a lot of dispute about whom this continent belongs to and who should establish their sovereignty there. We know that Christopher Columbus discovered America and then it became American continent and they established a government. But here there were Argentinians taking claim, and there were people from New Zealand, Australia taking claim. The Dutch had some businesses out there and whaling businesses. The British had some, research stations. So under President Dwight Eisenhower, there was a long negotiation for the Antarctica Treaty, and a treaty was signed in 1961. All 54 countries, including India, is a signatory to the Antarctica treaties, which says that this continent belongs to no one in particular. And people are allowed to set up a camp there for research purpose and peaceful purposes only, no industry or whatsoever, including the whaling industry, which was very big there at one given point of time. Some American uh, army troops used to land in Antarctica for training, under extreme circumstances. People would take expeditions to the South Pole. But after 1961, only peaceful purposes and expeditions and research is permitted there. This treaty, however, expires in 2048, which is not very far away. Maybe in your and my lifetimes, I don't know, but it's not that far away. And what happens after 2048, we don't know. It's for the future generations to safeguard the lovely the environmental heritage that we have over here. First impact is that Antarctica, although it's frozen as a continent, is teeming with life. It's literally teeming with life. We saw, whales by the dozens and maybe hundreds. We saw penguins by the millions. We saw birds by the thousands. We saw seals by the thousands. So and there is millions of different kinds of living creatures under the ocean. Krill by the billions and trillions. And so it's actually a continent that is teeming with life. It doesn't look like, although it's a frozen continent. How did we get to Argentina, which is the takeoff point for the sailing across the Drake's Passage? We took a Lufthansa from Mumbai to Buenos Aires via Frankfurt. A lot of times people ask these trivial questions. Once we arrived in Buenos Aires, there was a small little trip which was added on to our Antarctica trip, which was a place called Iguazu, to spend one night in a rainforest. Now, Iguazu has some of the world's best waterfalls. I mean, it's mind-blowing the kind of waterfalls they have there. It is rumored that Mrs. Roosevelt, when she visited Iguazu, she took one look at Iguazu and her statement was, "Poor Niagara." Iguazu is so much bigger and much more magnificent than even Niagara Falls. So we spent one day in Iguazu at the falls there, and we stayed back in Buenos Aires, and we took an early morning flight to the southernmost inhabited town called Ushuaia. It's the southernmost inhabitation of mankind, of human. And we boarded a ship called MV Hondius, which is run by Ocean-Wide Expeditions. From Ushuaia, we departed through something called the Beagle Channel, which means for about 3 or 4 hours, you have the islands and the mountains around you. And we crossed the Drake's Passage for 2 days of sailing. We crossed the Arctic Circle on the midnight of the second day, or early morning the second day. And we entered the Antarctic Peninsula below the Arctic Circle. I can tell you more about MV Hondius, Ocean-Wide Tours, and Wow Club. You just have to ask me. I want to share with you pictures of Iguazu Falls. I know this is a presentation on Antarctica, but I can't but help show you pictures of the Iguazu Falls because the pictures are so amazing. I promise very few pictures. So this is the first place in Argentina where 3 countries meet. Where I'm standing as a photographer, I'm in Argentina. On the right is Brazil, and on the left-hand side is Paraguay. And it is just further down, somewhere over here, if you can see my cursor, where the falls actually begin. And this is how the Iguazu Falls look. Okay, now I put in brackets, not my picture, because there's no way I could get a picture like that. You need to have special equipment. But this is how big and vast the falls are. So you can imagine, I don't know how many of you can see this little ramp over here on the top right hand. Now this little ramp is about 1 kilometer from where we got off the bus. And this ramp takes us all the way to a point over here, which is supposed to be the best view of the falls. Because when you're standing here, there's no way that you can one person can get a view of the total falls unless you're in an airplane like this person. So from this point, you take the view of the falls, which is the best view. This is not my picture, but this is how it looked when I saw the falls the first time. This is exactly how I looked. I was zapped, I was amazed, I was drenched in water, it was raining, and the steam was rising and everything was happening at the same time. And it was a mind-blowing experience just to look at the falls. Now my photography. So this is the upper trail which I just showed you. Some of the good shots that I got. There are many shots and it's difficult for me to show them all. But this is from the upper trail which we walked. There was a boat trip we took, which is called the shower boat, because it takes you to a point where you literally get a shower under the falls, and you're drenched, you're in raincoats, and you're with waterproof bags. So this is a picture of the falls from the shower boat. As I said, not one picture can capture the entire grandeur of the falls. This is from the lower trails. I remember Manjula and I had trekked up to this point, and it was, this was the last stop. Literally, we were tired and exhausted, but we had to reach this point, and this was after this, it was homeward bound. And this is from on top of the falls. So there's actually a bridge which you can walk on top of the falls, and you can see literally the falls are falling below you. And this is some of the rainforest birds also, which we managed to get some pictures of, which I'm just sharing with you because they're amazing pictures. And that's me blending into the rainforest, literally. So I have to show you one picture of me as well. Now, the Antarctica part of the tour. How we sailed from Ushuaia through the Beagle Channel and the Drake's Passage. How was that part? This is a picture from my mobile phone. It's a screenshot of the GPS location, and this is where I was standing on with my mobile phone when I took this click. Okay, so this was, I think, at the passport office. So this is where it was, and this is the Beagle Channel. It's a 4-hour sailing to get out into the open seas. This is the southernmost tip of the South American continent, and this is where inhabitation stops. And this is this all wilderness after that below. Some images of the Beagle Channel. Very peaceful. As long as you're in the channel, it's very peaceful. It's very calm sailing and smooth sailing, and some of the sunset in the Beagle Channel. It's beautiful. It's a lovely sailing. This is from the ship, the sunset from the ship, from the deck of the ship, how it looked. And the ship is called MV Hondius. And the first question we ask is, who's Hondius and what is Hondius about? Now, Hondius was a cartographer, which means he makes maps. And this map is everywhere all over the ship. So this is a map that Hondius made on a brass plate. This is the map that was famous in his time. It was the only map of the world which was beautiful, artistic, aesthetic, and it was well accepted. And it was replicated in the thousands and millions and sold. So he was one of the first. There were maps before this. It's not the first map. There were many maps before this, but this was the map that made Hondius famous. And so the ship was named after Hondius. There's some views from the captain's cabin. We were all over the ship the first 2 days because there was nothing to do for the first 2 days. And occasionally you'll see a bird that joins you. You'll see a bird over here. They'll come and join you. There will be. And each one of our rooms had a little intercom system. So very, very often in the middle of the night, you will hear an announcement. Okay, we can see an albatross, or we can see a snow petrel, or we can see some special birds. Come and see. And then we saw some Ross seal also that way. We saw some whales that way. We saw a lot of birds while we were on the Drake's Passage. And every time there would be an announcement, and everyone will rush on deck, and see. So this was some of the. These are the 6 boats which are called Zodiacs. These are called Zodiacs, and these Zodiacs are inflatable rafts which carry us, off the ship into the mainland wherever we had to go. So these were our living quarters for 10 days. The entire trip was 10 days long. So this was where we spent 10 nights. I had a roomie, and we got along well, and it's a small but very comfortable. This was the cattle class, literally, in a way, because this was called a twin porthole cabin. The only advantage of this was that you had only 1 floor to climb if you wanted meals, and 2 floors to climb if you want to get to the lounge. The boarding of the Zodiac buses, the Zodiac rafts was at the same level. So it was just to step out of your room and get into the raft, literally. Our ship was very new polar vehicle. It was commissioned in 2019. So, which meant it had a lot of modern features, including, water desalination and a lot of modern features, which were quite well appointed. It's not like a luxury cruise liner, but we did not want for anything. Everything was available for us. And one of the big advantages of being a new ship is that this ship has something called a hull door, which means that it has a door in the hull and that opens out at the sea level. And all you have to do is to literally, like this, step into your Zodiac boat. You don't have to go down the ramp, or you don't have to climb up any, big staircases or anything. You just have to step into the Zodiac boat. And that's very convenient, believe me, especially when you're my age. So this is a shot I've taken from a boat, of our boat from our Zodiac, and I took shots of the boat everywhere, but I won't show you all the boat shots because not important. But this is how MV Hornbase looks, in the Antarctica. And person in the picture is actually Manjula. We had the same jacket, she and me. We shared the same jacket from Decathlon that I had. So our pictures are sometimes interchangeable. So just to tell you, this is where Antarctic Peninsula is. Antarctica is a huge continent, perhaps as big as Asia. And if you know that India has a, a research station somewhere here called Dakshin Gangotri, and then it has some station, over here as well, where some research is being carried out on different kinds of fish and species, mapping of species, etc., and whatnot. This is called the Antarctic Peninsula, and this is where we also call Graham Land, and this is where we explored literally. And so if someone says, hey, you're going to Antarctica, visit the Indian station, well, that's as far as going to Europe, all the way from here. So this is our route, which we took. So we crossed the Antarctic Circle, which is somewhere here, and we entered the peninsula at the base. And this is the entire peninsula. And we entered, and then we were sailing through all these channels and Lemurge canals and whatnot. And then we came up to Deception Island, Southern Shetland Islands, and we went back. So the entire sailing was 10 days. And the most difficult part was the crossing of the Drake's Channel. And I will not tell who was seasick and who was not, but at least I was not seasick. I'm thankful for that. And because I could see my friends who were seasick were going through hell, literally. The Drake's Passage is the roughest crossing in the world, anywhere. It's the roughest sea in the world. That's because, it's the Andes Mountains, they go underwater, and then the oceans, the Pacific and the Atlantic, they meet, and there's hot waters and cold waters, and the water is very turbulent in the Drake's Passage. So sometimes you have like 14 meters high, the waves come, and you can literally at night, you can see your bunkers rising and falling and rising and falling. And if you're seasick, then it can be difficult because you can't get off the boat. You have to just suffer it. So when we reached the first day, after 2 days of sailing, when we reached, let me say, but 2 days we did not do nothing. There was lots to do on the boat. There were lots of lectures on the environment, the kinds of birds we are going to see, the kind of whales we're going to see. There was a lecture on every species we had to view. There were lectures on impact of global warming. Interesting. We had an expedition team which was led by a British guy called Adam. It was a multi-diverse team, but Adam was an amazing guy. I mean, I'll go on a trip with him again anytime. He was really good. And his team was very well qualified. There was even somebody who was doing research while we were on the trip on acoustics. What is acoustics? Acoustics is the sound that the whales make. So they had these hydrophonic micro mics, which were recording sound under the water. And then they would play back those sounds to us. So the day would pass just by, meeting friends, people, and listening to these lovely lectures, and enjoying the boat and the ride and the lovely food that we had. We had an Indian chef, by the way, and he was very good. Chef Baba, his name was. And we had an Indian front office manager. So the front office manager took care of our needs, everything, because we were practically the only Indians on board. The rest of the trip was very multicultural, largely European, because it's run by Ocean Wide Tours, which is a Dutch company. And so the first day when we landed, this place is called Detail Island. This was the first of 8 landings planned. Okay, eventually we did only 7 because one got called off because of bad weather. But Detail Island, let me share with you. This is a picture of the island which I took. You can see an abandoned, something abandoned kind of a hut over there, a building. And now this was in 1961 when the treaty was signed. The British used to do research there before that. And in 1961, it was also used as a supply base for some of the other research stations run by the British. And in 1961, they abandoned it because of the treaty being signed. And it's the structure still stands, and it has gone through so many years of being wintered in. This, the first of the wildlife we saw was blue-eyed shags. These are cormorants from the cormorant family. I'm not very expert at identifying which bird is which, but I got a lot of help from my friends, including Shalini. This is something called a kelp gull. So we saw this picture, and these are the gulls that fly, even in the sea. They can stay out at sea for ages. And sometimes, the size of the picture is very deceptive, because things like albatross and all, they have up to 2.5 to 3 meters wingspan. So you can imagine how massive those birds are. And so this is my favorite picture. And for a long time, it was my profile picture on Facebook. So those of you who have my Facebook friends would have seen this picture. For a long time, it was there. This actually, what happens is there is an Antarctic Tour Operators Treaty that only 100 people are allowed on land, any one boat at any given point in time. So our boat had about 200 odd passengers, 193 passengers and a few crew, and 70 crew. So about 190 passengers, we had to take turns in going on land. So everybody would get into the Zodiac boats, and some of us would go cruising around, watching icebergs, looking for whales, and understanding more about the environment, while others would go and land on the land. And then when the others would get off, we would go on. And the expedition leader who was leading our boat would be in touch with the headquarters and with the base to know when our turn is going to come. So we would get a good idea of the cruising part, where the real good natural beauty is, and then we would put our foot on land and get there. So it was a stormy day, it was very dull weather, and suddenly the sun shines, and one iceberg is shining in the far end of the horizon. And this iceberg was actually very far away, but I managed to zoom and I took this picture. And it was amazing. Everything else was dull gray, and this was one like a diamond that was shining. And there's another iceberg. Believe me, no color touch up in this one. It is for true. This color is for true, is for real. There's absolutely no touch up. Why is it blue? What is an iceberg? First, you have to understand. When it snows during the winter season, there's a lot of snow, and snow is all inland. The snow forms glaciers, which are like rivers of snow. And the glaciers form ice shelves, which when they meet the water, they kind of become frozen ice shelves. And then eventually, because of warm waters and summer, winter, summer, and some partly global warming, these ice shelves break down into icebergs. And then these icebergs set adrift. So actually, this is an iceberg. It looks like a landmass, but it's a big iceberg, and they just float out there. And some of them are like big islands in themselves. Massive icebergs, small icebergs, all sizes. So this snow that forms the iceberg is actually fresh water. It's not salty, it's fresh water because it's fresh snow. But it's snow that has accumulated over the years. And this snow could be as much as centuries or millennia old. And because it is old snow, it gets compacted very deeply. Because it gets compacted, it turns a blue color. And also, being in Antarctica, we get more UV rays than infrared rays of the sunlight. So the sunlight also tends to reflect more of blue. So believe me, there's no added color in this photograph. This is the way the blue actually is. And some more pictures of blue, an amazing blue and white. This was a little dull, but I loved this picture because the reflection and the stillness of the water, it captures the pristineness of the entire environment. That's how pristine, how untouched, and how perfect it is, over there. The vastness. I wanted to capture the vastness. I think this picture captures how vast the whole thing was. And these are just bits of icebergs floating around, all bits of icebergs over here floating around, some big, some small, some far, some near. This was on the detail island, some abandoned structures. You go there. And first sight of penguins. So this was the first time we saw penguins on Detail Island, and they were far away. They were not where we were landing, and they were just like dots on the little dots on top of the rock. And that's one of the boats, Zodiac boats over there, which you can see. This is how a landing looked like. First, there would be a scout boat that would go out. They would find a spot which is convenient for us to land a boat and convenient for people. So sometimes it would be a dry landing, which means when you put your foot out, foot goes onto land. Sometimes it would be a wet landing, which means when you put your foot off the Zodiac, it goes into water. So we are supplied these massive gumboots, and we have to wear those at all times. And these were very good because they actually gave a very good grip on the soil, on the rocks, on the climbs, on the snow. Muckmasters kind of big gumboots, and so those gumboots were very useful, because if you get off, and you are not only gumboots, but you have to also wear waterproof pants. I'll tell you another webinar on what were the preparations we did by way of gear and clothing and things that we had to do to protect ourselves from the harshness of the environment. This was the first close-up with the penguin, and this was on an iceberg just like 5 meters away from where our Zodiac was. It was literally like, from my bedroom to my bathroom door. It was so near. And it was a beautiful solitary penguin, and I managed to get this shot. I thought this was one of the good shots I had. And then this was further down, we got more penguins. We got good close-ups of penguins. These are something called crab-eater seals, and they just languish on the penguins, on the icebergs. So there's flat sheet ice over there, or there's an iceberg, mostly the flat sheet ice, and they will be just sitting there soaking up the sun, and then they will eat, and they go in the water, and they'll come back up, and they just languish there in big herds of maybe 6, 7, or sometimes you'll find a solitary seal also. But they seem to be talking, they seem to be talking to us, and they seem to be wanting a conversation. So this particular fellow, is a crab-eater seal. He reminded me of the song, The Simple Bare Necessities of Life. It's so lazy and so... But they say that if you meet a seal on land, don't take any, pangas with the seal, because if it starts chasing you, a seal can actually outrun human beings. So don't be deceived by the fact that they have, these big solid bodies with very little legs and only flippers, but they can actually outrun human beings, especially the fur seals, and they can get pretty aggressive. So it's almost like you have to be careful and keep your distance. Day 2 landing was at Yalur Island, which was on our... Some pictures I got here, which is the southern giant petrel. It's one of the largest birds of the southern Antarctica. And then this was on the nest. This is how they nest. They lay their eggs. And so this one was probably hatching an egg, because there were 2 or 3 nests, and the nests are always open. And we weren't allowed to go too close. The expedition people, they said, hey, don't go there. There's a nest and they're hatching birds. It's the breeding season for them. There's some more blue-eyed shag here. Here you can actually see the blue eyes of the shag. And again, there's no color touch-up in any of these pictures. This particular iceberg was like translucent. I could see in, and I could see that, okay, what I'm looking at is centuries and millennia old ice. There are probably some frozen life forms over there. So, this was like a lovely castle, this iceberg. And I took many pictures, and then suddenly the sun came out, and then the wave was splashing on the side. And that was the best click I got of this one. Delhi's on an outing. some of the lovely landscapes, the vast, pristine, untouched landscapes, the huge canopy of sky is like unbelievable. Look at that one. It's so massive. These are some of the expeditioners. So you can see how small and insignificant the human beings are on this. It's all penguin land, you know. And Darshi, who's my roommate, she says, you know, I'm so grateful the penguins have allowed us into their land and they don't shoo us off. And here are some colonies of penguins. These are mostly Adelies because where we were was Adelie land. There are 16 different kind of penguins. Some are like 6 inches tall, which you'll find in New Zealand, you know, which you'll find the tiny ones, I don't know, 6 inches, that's all. And then there are emperor penguins that are 1.5 meters tall, which is almost like bigger than human beings, bigger than the average human being. And the emperor penguins are found only in Antarctica and the Falkland Islands. But you have to go inland. You have to trek for a day or two before you get to the emperor penguin colonies. So, this is lovely. I love the bouquet of the seawater behind. Now, why are they dirty? Why is the chest of this penguin dirty? And why did I take this picture? Because, you know, these penguins eat one thing, and it's the most nutritious thing that is there available to them. And that's called krill. Krill is a kind of a shrimp. So the penguins go underwater and they go porpoising. We saw a lot of penguins porpoising, and they porpoise, they just go underwater and they come up and underwater and up. I tried to get many pictures of the porpoising penguins, but I couldn't get any. Unfortunate. But when we look at them, they, you know, there are 6 or 7 of them that will porpoise at the same time. And sometimes they'll come along the ship and, you know, so now all the pictures I got were so horrible and blurry. I couldn't share those. So this is an Adelie. So this krill is bright pink in color, bright pink. And it kind of gets messy. And this one is probably a juvenile, which means it is, it's not a full adult and it's still being fed by his father. The fathers are the one who go feeding. And or the mothers also go feeding. So it's probably fed. So that's why it's all messed up. It's messed up with the krill juice. And so when the season we went in February, there was is a different time of the year. Their summer begins sometime in November and goes on till March, April. And in the breeding season begins in November. So November is when you'll see all the mating happening, where the male penguins, they, you know, collect pebbles and give the female penguins, because the one who collects the best and the most beautiful penguins are the ones the females will mate with, because those little pebbles go to make their nests. And the penguins are very loyal. Once they mate with one penguin, they will not mate with any other. So November is when the mating season happens. Then by December or so, the chicks are, you know, the eggs are laid and the chicks are hatched. And then by January or so, the chicks become what is called juveniles. And the juveniles then become adults. They cannot go into the sea to feed themselves till they don't become adults, because their feathers are not capable of withstanding that temperature and enabling them to swim. The feathers are a very, very important part of the whole thing. So, by the time we reach in February, the molting season begins. So it's an in-between phase. So some were juveniles. We could see a lot of juveniles. Very few chicks we saw, very, very few. You have to really look for them. But largely we saw penguins molting. So that's when they molt, they stand, they can't go to fish, they can't go to feed when they're molting. So they just stand there like solitary creatures, looking very sorry because their feathers are all in disarray and they're just molting all the time. So that's a little bit about. This was a nice shot I got with the blue and white landscapes. Again, no color touch-ups in any of these. Just a little cropping and sharpening of the pictures, that's all. So yes, we had some very good close encounters. Now this is a Weddell seal. And a Weddell seal it's called the Weddell Sea. The sea is called Weddell Sea nearby. So there's a lot of history. So this guy is languishing. You can see over here on the belly, there are a lot of scars they have, you know, All the creatures there, they have their own individual markings, especially the whales. The whales are identified by the markings that they carry. And when we get to the section where I've got pictures of whales, I'll tell you a little bit more about that. This one's a crab eater seal because the shape of the mouth is different, and the texture of the mottled texture is different. Now this one is extremely rare, and this actually I got this picture more from the deck of the ship than from land or anywhere else, because this was sitting on an iceberg as we sailed past, and we were called out and said, Ross seal, come and see Ross seal. It is extremely rare. Even our expedition leaders, many of them had seen it for the first time, and they said, no, we can't confirm that this is a Ross seal. We have to go back to, so they sent pictures back to headquarters, and they got a confirmation, yes, this is a Ross seal. Ross seals are extremely rare. It's almost like seeing a snow leopard, or a tiger, spotting a tiger, So they're extremely rare, but they have a very typical mouth, and their eyes are very, very big. And I got this shot. This shot actually, it was part of a bigger shot. I had to crop it out. And this one I had to bring out the eyes, I had to do a lot of color manipulation to bring out the eyes. Otherwise, it was like one big black blob. But this is a very beautiful picture. I don't think even the best picture that was shown to us over there was not as good as this one of this particular seal. But this is the Ross seal. Some more lovely blue shades. It's amazing blues, as I said. This gives you an idea of how much ice, how much snow and rock and penguin and water. Okay, so we were on the other side of the harbor, at Yalur, and our tour operator, he gets a call on his phone, on his what's called those wireless phones, and come, there is couple of there is one humpback seal, humpback whale. So we went rushing and we went back and we saw the humpback whales. So here are some of the shots. Unfortunately, my camera by now, it was almost 3 hours out, and my camera was clicking and got run out of batteries. So, and I didn't carry my ancillary camera. I carried one camera only. So unfortunately, I had only my mobile phone to click. So can you believe these are mobile phone shots? So Samsung Galaxy S7, thank you very much. I took some great shots at this whale sighting. And so this is how close I'm on the boat, and we were about 10 people to a boat, and this is how close the whales were. I've included the picture of this lady here to give you an idea how close the whale is. It's so nearby. And these are humpback whales. And then there were 2 whales. There was not one. The second one surfaced. Very curious to know who are these people. And then it gave us the show of a lifetime. This is called a tail flick, and the tail just flicks like that. And many award-winning, shots are like this, where you can literally see the water dripping off the fins. And this is a tail flick. You can see the droplets of water on the edges of the fin, which are just falling down. Beautiful one. This is opening up the flick like butterflies. And this is when it's going down. So you can imagine how amazing it was to see those 2 whales. I've got videos. One day I'll put together the final video on Antarctica, and I'll do a show on that as well. But there are many videos as well. So they day 2 second landing. So what we did was we'd get out on the Zodiacs, we'd go out 4 or 5 hours, then we'd come back, have lunch and rest a bit. And then in the evening again, we'd go out, and then come back for dinner. So there would be 2 landings a day mostly, on most days, except some days when the weather was very bad. And in between landings, we are sailing. So we'd sail for 3-4 hours, and you don't realize you've moved quite a few hundred kilometers and you're at another place altogether. And so this is a brown skua. Now skuas are scavengers, not scavengers, they're predators, sorry. They're predators. And skuas, they eat penguin eggs and penguin chicks. That's their staple diet. So, and they're predators, and a pretty nasty piece of work you can see here. They're quite big. This is quite a big one. It's a big bird. It's about 2-3 feet big, and I think the wingspan, I'll have to check and let you know. Scientific measure of a bird is the wingspan and weight. So these are massive birds, and so I'll tell you a story. I was standing here on Peterman Island with Darshi for a long time, and I was taking video. I've got huge videos of this. Someday, like I said, I'll put together the videos. There was this kua bird, and when I started taking the pictures, these penguins were not there. The little something that the kua bird was after was under the belly of these penguins. Maybe it was a chick, maybe it was a juvenile. There were no eggs that at this time in the life cycle, there were no eggs that we could see. There were only eggshells we saw all over the place. So the squirrel was trying to get at that little chick or that little juvenile that's hiding behind. And there was this one penguin. These are Gentoo penguins, by the way. They're different from the Adelies. One, they have red beaks, and two, they have this little white patch above the eyes. So there was this one penguin who came and started shooing off the penguins are very gentle mannered people, and they don't have the slightest bit of aggressiveness in them. So this guy was coming and making a lot of noise. Get off my land, get off my land, get off my land. And every time he do that, this poor would kind of fly up for a bit, circle a little bit, and then come back and settle again. This happened about 20 times. This guy would shoot. In the meantime, this whole crowd accumulated. There was, to begin with, just one penguin, and then everybody started coming. And now all these fellows were watching. All these penguins were watching, while this penguin was the only one battling this massive skua. I felt so sorry. I said, this happens in human beings also. I mean, there's only one person who takes up the battle and says, hey, the emperor's not wearing any clothes, and everyone else plays the game, So it was like that. It was an amazing time. I was just standing there almost 20 minutes. I stood there to watch the story unfolding. And then, they were calling us back to board the boats again. So I had to leave. I didn't see the ending of that. But the standoff could have gone on for a long time. It was literally like a standoff that was happening. Why is the snow pink? Many times people have told me, hey, you went to Antarctica, we hear there's global warming happening and the volcanic ash is coming up and it's turning the landscape pink. I thought that was very funny. I laughed because why is the snow pink? It's because that is penguin poop. And penguin poop is pink because penguin eat krill, and krill is pink. It's nothing but years and years of penguin poop over there. So it's a lovely shade of pink, I must say. And there's some very interesting to see the landscape, but the pink is purely, and then there is another algae, which is a pink color algae, which kind of grows on the penguin poop. So it's actually penguin poop. So don't believe those stories. So some more pink snow you can see over here, and some penguins, and you can see how vast the land is. You can see penguins on the corners also. You can see how vast the landscape is. And some solitary penguins, some colonies just standing there. Mostly the penguins are just standing because it's molting season. Let's see. There was a whale skeleton also we came across. Gentoo penguins. More Gentoo penguins. Port Lockroy is where the British had their have an active station. And since our boat was led by a British expeditioner, he took us to Port Lockroy. He knew the people there. And the two women, only women managing that entire research base. It's a supply base and a research base. And there's a souvenir shop. You can buy souvenirs. You can post a postcard. So I posted 3 postcards at the post office there. Only one has reached, 2 have not reached yet because of lockdown. I don't know. But postcard to New Zealand reached. I think it was Her Majesty's Postal Service. So it reached New Zealand. It didn't reach India for some reason. So this is a snowy sheepbill. This is a scavenger bird. This is scavenger. It eats up all garbage, all the leftover remnants of other and other leftover by other animals. It eats up you know eggshells of penguins after the eggs are hatched. So very necessary. While we are sailing around Port Lockroy and other places, you'll always hear a thundering sound, coming, and it's coming from somewhere far away, and it's like a dharam 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 dharam, thundering kind of sound, rolling thundering sound. And when we ask what is this sound, we were told it's the sound of calving glaciers. So when the glaciers move, they make this sound, and sometimes the movement is huge. And I don't know if you have seen, sometimes on YouTube you'll get these videos on WhatsApp also, of glaciers that have calved, which means they've moved significantly. They don't move like constantly, at one, like a river flows constantly. It's like big chunk of ice will move on the glacier. So they're called calving glaciers. So the sound we would hear, terrifying sound, terrifying. We didn't see any glaciers calved. Sometimes, people are fortunate. They actually see that whole lot of, like it looks like an avalanche, but it's actually just a river of ice. So this is the molting season. So how penguins look in the mold. You can't swim with this kind of feeding time. So juvenile is being fed. You can tell it's a juvenile because its feathers are not fully formed. This was a close-up face-to-face. You see the eyes are very like little slits. The eyes are like little slits. Apparently they have 6 or 7 eyelids. And when they're out in the open, they don't need to see much. They'll just do this much and there's adequate vision. But when they go under the sea, it's very dark there. They open their eyes fully when they're under the sea. So many of the penguins, they have their eyes quite shut when they're out there. This was inside the museum. The museum is nothing but it's just the way people used to live in the 50s and 60s, and everything is kept the way it is. There's cans of, Campbell soup and books like P.G. Woodhouse and others sitting over there, and Marilyn Monroe posters. This is how they lived. Day 3 landing Jugla Port, the weather was very bad and very stormy. And this was one thing that I didn't get off the boat that day. I didn't take the land trip that day, but I got good shots from the Zodiac. I took the Zodiac cruise for almost 4 hours. We were cruising. So this was a good 4-hour cruise. And there were lots of things to click, but I just took a few. And this was one of the best shots I got there, the leopard seal. Then we sailed through the Limay Channel. That was the day we had a barbecue on the deck. Through the channel when you're sailing, because it would be proper daylight till about 10 o'clock, and then till about 12 it would be dark, and then by 4 it would start getting light again. 4 or 5 it would start getting light again. So this was some click of the Limay Channel. A beautiful cruise. We had an outdoor barbecue. Of course, everything would get cold immediately as you got it on your plate. Everyone was like bundled up completely with all their, and there was mulled wine, free mulled wine. Everybody was having that. And it was a nice time. Good music playing, people dancing on the deck. Some more icebergs. Lovely. I didn't know which landscapes to choose for you. Okay, so far we had been landing on islands and we had not touched the mainland continent. And we found one spot where we could do a continental landing, and that was a small, tiny spot. So we just did that. We just touched the land, and Massimo, who was our expedition leader, who was also the official photographer of the tour, he said, okay, you guys are going to do the Asian thing and kiss the land on which you land. So that's one thing I'm not going to do. So, so this is when we actually landed on the mainland. Look at this. Look at this shot. Just look at it. And the same bird in flight, I have 5 or 6 different shots of it. I chose only one for you. And then there was a boat which was on the other side of the. Then, across the harbor from the continental landing, we saw one iceberg gleaming in the sun, and it was just gleaming just the way, like this is one, this is a picture of that iceberg, and how it was shining, you can't capture it in a picture in the real life. It was literally like a diamond, it was sparkling. And Massimo said, let's go visit that one. Good photo opportunity. He was a photographer. Oh boy, that was a rough ride on the Zodiac. It was a long drive on the ride on the Zodiac, rough. Every one of us, we all got drenched completely. Unfortunately, I had complete waterproof. Only my gloves were the only thing that were not waterproof. And I regretted not having bought the waterproof gloves. I just used an old pair of leather gloves that I had. So my hands were frozen that day. And everybody was drenched through and through. Those who were waterproof were safe. Those who were not waterproof had a bad time. But we went to see this iceberg and we crossed across. This was when we were on the continent. There's Shalini, there's Manjula, there's me, and three of us landed on the continent. We didn't kiss the land, but we got the selfie. At least we touched mainland Antarctica. So this is a chin strap penguin. Obviously, there's a chin, the strap under the chin. You can see it's got this black line. And I took this picture over breakfast the next morning because, while we were having breakfast, and I was on the table next to this table, just on this side of the table from where I'm taking this picture. And there were actually whales who were feeding outside. So they were having breakfast and we were having breakfast too. And these are some of the other passengers on the boat. But just to tell you that how close we were to the whales, And since we were on the boat, I said, let me show you some more how it looks. And there's an amazing landscape outside the windows. This is the lounge area. There was a lounge on the second floor, so we used to hang out there. And you can have tea, coffee, and soup any time of the day, and play games of Scrabble or any other games that you wanted. Read books, listen to music. Then there was a call. There is a bunch of killer whales, orca whales they're called. And why are they called killer whales? Because they kill other whales. They eat other whales. And actually, it's an evolved species of dolphin. It's in between a dolphin and a whale, the killer whales. So there's a huge bunch of them. I've got more videos than photos here. So when I do the video, you'll see good videos. I've got amazing videos of them actually beaching. When the whale beaches, it comes out, And there's this particular killer whale actually beached. It came out completely out of the water. They come and then they go back in. So there's a lot of beaching that happens. And they spout water and then they show their fins and then they do the tail flick. So there are different things that they do which entertain us. So this is when they're doing the water spouting thing. Tail flicks. And this was almost 15, 20 of them were feeding frenzy. There was a feeding frenzy going on. Now we are nearing the end of our trip, only one day left, and Whalers Bay is where we landed, which is close to the South Shetland Islands. And why is it called Whalers Bay? It's a volcano. It's an active volcano. It erupts every 35 years. So, and they said the last erupted about 35 years ago. So we were expecting an eruption any day now. It's just a joke. But this is like, because it's a volcano, it's got like a semicircular bay kind of thing, in which the water comes. So in the 30s and 40s, whale oil was the primary source of fuel for oil lamps and furnaces and furnace oil and things like that, whale blubber. So whaling industry used to bring all the whales, capture the whales and bring them, and then this huge vast land where the whales used to be thrown and killed, and then their blubber used to be extracted, and the factory is still there. I'll show you the very sad scene, very, very sad, because first of all, this landscape is totally stark and it's black. And second, these remains of the factory. And then third, the stories we had to hear about how cruel the whaling industry was and how the whale population of the earth had dropped to almost 20%. And then now, of course, it's bounced back. But since whaling was banned in the 40s, I think, I don't remember when, but the whaling was banned after a point when. So very desolate. These are the remains of the factories. You can see tanks over here. And this is how we landed. This particular structure is called the Neptune's Bellows, because there was a plane that would come and it would land. It would come from there, it would land on this strip over here. This was a part of the plane landing. This is how the plane would land. So it was given the name Neptune's Bellows. And if you Google Neptune's bellows, you'll get a lot more information on that. But these are like whale carcasses and whale bones over there. Some dilapidated structures. People used to live here in the whaling season, which is in the summer, because most whales are migratory. There are a lot of whales, say for example, in Indian Ocean, Arabian Sea, there are a lot of whales, but they all come down to Antarctica for feeding because that's where they get the most nutritious food and the krill. They all come during feeding season. Yeah, then they go back to mate into their original places. So mostly the whales are not residents of Antarctica. They are migrants. They come, they feed, and they go back. So these are some big tankers in which the whale oil would be stored. And these are some of us. This picture is something very special. There are a lot of fur seals over there. This is when we were told that a lot of people took what is called a polar plunge on the beach, which means that they stripped down to their swimming costumes and they went into the water. And I had not taken my swimming costume. If I had taken my swimming costume, I might have tried it. So I remember having taken Ganga Snan in peak winter at 3 degrees Celsius, it was about the same temperature on Whalers Bay that day. So, and then the day 5 was half moon. This was our last day. We were just left loose on the island, do as much as you want, 4 hours. And I just sat in one place for so much time, and I just sat and I watched. There were lots of chinstrap colonies of chinstrap penguins. You can see the penguins on the beach over here. And this is the point at which I sat, and you can see that the clouds were kind of just, meandering, and the sun it was playing on the sunlight, on the snow. And I've got a time-lapse video of this place. Someday I will put that out. In the time-lapse video, you can actually see the sun playing on the snow, through the clouds. And it's so beautiful. When I just sit there. I sat there for nearly an hour taking that time-lapse video. And then in that video, I got shots of penguins walking up and down. And we also had a lot of people in our ship who were interested in canoeing. So the kayaking. So many of them got off and kayaked down this little strait over here. It was a good kayaking site. So people were kayaking as well. And there's another lovely shot. Another beautiful shot. Just vast. And then 2 days of Drake Passage. The return Drake Passage was worse. It was worse. I was reminded of that Samuel Taylor Coleridge, poem that we did when I was in 9th standard in school, The Rime of the Ancient Mariner. And it's the story of this mariner or the sail captain of a boat who gets marooned and loses his way somewhere in the southern Antarctic, and he makes friends with an albatross who dies, and then this albatross is dying, and it's a very morbid story, the poem. But there was a very part of that poem which went about the ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It whooped and swooped and something that making noises like noises in a swound. Like when you're in a swoon, when you're fainting, you hear that sound. So our polar vehicle would cut through the ice and cut through the snow and cut through the sheet ice. It had a limit. It was not an icebreaker, but it was a polar vehicle. And it would make all those sounds in the middle of the night when you're sailing. And the Drake's Passage was truly terrifying on the way back. Again, I count my blessings that I was not seasick, but those who were, again, had a very difficult time. And that Drake's Passage took 2 days and didn't abate. This time it was worse than on the way up. And when we came back to Ushuaia, these are some pictures of Ushuaia. Actually, these pictures were taken from, this particular was taken from the flight in, but I put it here. So this tells you what Ushuaia is like. And this is how it was when we actually sailed in. It was around 10:30 at night. I had already gone to sleep. And then I suddenly just opened the corner of my eyes. I say, hey, there are lights outside. I can see lights. Land ahoy. And I just put on my jacket and I went out on the deck and I said, I have to click this amazing sight it was. And everybody was out on the deck. Everybody was out on the deck. And these are some of the lovely clicks. So you can see how we are approaching the port. And look at the color of the sky and look at the stillness of the water. And that's picture of me. I just got out of bed. I just got out of bed. And this actually ship that you can see was a ship of Greenpeace. You can see Greenpeace written over here if your screen is large enough. And there was a news report about Greenpeace expedition at the same time. And there was a massive petition and massive publicity around that. And it was just taking off the day we were landing back. So that is my slideshow. And now I'm going to unmute everybody. So guys, please feel free to chat. You can unmute yourself, yes. Please unmute yourself and feel free to chat.
Aneeta.
Yes.
It was a lovely presentation.
Thank
now
you.
Just guide us about what were the expenses you made on this.
So if you have any question which you really want, just put it on, on the chat also. I look at the chat. What was the expenses? Well, the actual tour cost was about, including the Iguazu Fall extension. If I didn't take that, it would be cheaper. But it was about 8 lakhs. And then the air ticket from here to Argentina and back, and I was flying economy, which I very rarely fly, is about 2.5 lakhs. And gear and equipment was about under 1 lakh, about 60,000. So you got to keep a budget about 10 to 11 lakhs.
And what are the visas you have to take?
I had to take visa only for Argentina, and that's not easy. Because
that's not easy.
Yeah, because everything is in Spanish there, and you have to have a yellow fever vaccine, and they have very funny operating hours, and then the currency is so weak, and so you pay in, and then suddenly the visa fee changes. So there were a lot of touch points there on the visa formalities.
And how much early you have to plan? If you have to go to the next season, we have to plan how much time we have to give?
Well, if you want to go, I would say Wow Club takes only women, but for men, you can also book directly with Oceanwide Tours. And Oceanwide, I would recommend MV Hondius any day. Beautiful boat, beautiful crew, beautiful food, beautiful everything. And very, very comfortable compared to what I've heard about other polar vehicles. People have told me they're very uncomfortable polar vehicles, and there's no luxuries at all. Whereas this was quite comfortable. So you can book, I think they announced 7-8 months. I think next year's trips are already announced.
Yeah.
Next, because the season is November, if you're going to Antarctica, the season is November to March. And if you're going to the North Pole, then the season begins now, is ending now, more or less. So if you're going to North, so Oceanwide does North Pole during April to September, and it does the South Pole during the rest of the year. So you plan now.
Any risk you have?
Some physical fitness is important. So you got to just start working out and start preparing your body, because you don't want to just go there and land up with aches and pains, and so just prepare yourself by doing a little bit of. It's not strenuous by any means. It's not strenuous, not at all strenuous, but it's a challenge because you have to wear so many clothes and you've got all this clunky stuff around you. And we were fortunate to have a hull door, so getting on and off the boat was not difficult, but it was not strenuous. So
okay.
There were people older than me. There were 2 women who were 72 plus, and one of them with a walking stick.
Oh.
So you can imagine.
That's great. That's great.
So there were people with foot problems. People with foot problems. They all managed. So age is not a criteria. It's good to be a little bit physically fit for your own welfare, for your own benefit.
Thanks.
Thank you.
What a super time I had.
Thank you, Kashmira. I can see Kashmira is also there. Yeah.
I loved it. And so did my husband.
So all you have to do is to just put a few words in the chat window. And, I will
Yes,
save
yes,
that. I will
sure.
save that.